Last 4 or 5 Saturday nights, we have been dealing with Jesus speaking in parables, which begins in verse 10. Disciples have come, of course, and asked Jesus why he's doing this, and we've been trying to walk through that subject. And he deals with that from verse 10 all the way down through and including verse 17. And in dealing with that, he, of course, started with a parable itself. And that parable is the first 10 verses of chapter 13. Jesus has gone out of the house. This is at the close, probably early evening of a full day, which was the Sabbath day, and a controversy, and we'll get into a little of that in a minute. But he is trying to escape the multitudes and has finally made his way to the shores of Galilee, and is just sitting there meditating alone with his Father. And of course the multitudes come after him. And he turns to them, and it is so dramatic in what he does that the disciples recognize it. In other words, this is a whole shift in ministry preaching approach. He's not done this before. Now you can argue, did he speak in parables up to this time? Had he ever told a parable? And my conclusion is he had not. But then, see, we call some of the things he did, for instance, in the Sermon on the Mount at the end, we call that a parable, which there's some argument there. Anyhow, however you shake that down, a dramatic change is taking place here, and he's speaking in parables. And the first parable that he told is this parable of the sower. And here's the way it reads. Verse 3. Then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went out to sow. As he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside. The birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. Some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. Others fell on good ground and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, the disciples have come and said, hey, what's the deal? Why are you speaking in parables? And Jesus gives an answer to that, but he turns then at the close of that in verse 18 and says, Therefore, hear the parable of the sower. And he gives his own explanation. Now that's kind of a downer because we like to take the parables and do what we want to with them. But now you can't because Jesus, who told the parable in the first place, is explaining it. Which means, hey, it's really limited in its explanation. So you are limited to what Jesus has to say because there's no room for interpretation and there's no way you can get around the truth that Jesus is giving. So he himself is giving his explanation to the parable. Now there's some really interesting things, and of course we're going to spend lots of nights on this, but I want to introduce this to you by talking to you about what he doesn't say in the explanation. And this is really intriguing to me, and I hope it'll reach you as well. But when you come to verse 18, as he begins the explanation in chapter 13, verse 18, it's really significant that there is an absence of any kind of emphasis on the sower himself. In other words, in the parable of verse 3, behold, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seed. So the whole story starts with the sower. But when he comes to give his explanation, he totally admits that. He totally ignores it. He pushes it aside, like, I'm not going to give you any explanation about who the sower is, what the sower is all about, what he was trying to accomplish, what the motive of the sower was, who is the ultimate sower, are there subcategories of sowing. She doesn't go into any of that, no explanation about the sower at all. Like, hey, that's none of your business, I don't even talk to you about. So this whole sermon tonight is on a sower, which has nothing to do with the subject at all. So this whole sermon is a waste of time because Jesus didn't deal with it at all. So isn't it intriguing that when it comes, the questions I would have wanted to know and would have wanted him to explain would have been in relationship to the sower, the role of the sower, the techniques of sowing, all of those kinds of things, and he ignores the whole thing like that's not the point of the parable. That the focus of the parable is not on the sower. Now, that's also true about the seed thing, which is intriguing. Now, the seed is mentioned in the explanation, but you'll note in verse 18, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it. That's all he has to say about the seed. In other words, again, you'd have no explanation of what is the seed. Is the seed the truth? Is the living word the truth? Is the written word the truth? He gives no explanation about any of that, like, hey, that's none of your business. We're not here to discuss the sower, and we're not here to discuss the seed. That's totally beside the point. That is not the point of the parable. Well, then, what is the point of the parable? Obviously, the point of the parable, which the explanation bears out, is the fact the parable is all about soil. And the reason the soil is so significant and is the whole point of the parable is it's all about response. The seed is not in question. The sower is not in question. What's up for question, what we're looking at in suspicion, what we're scratching our head about, what we're wondering about, what is maybe not about, is not the sower and not the seed, it's the soil. The thing that's suspicious in your life is not the sower and not the seed. The thing that you need to really focus on and worry about is the soil, which is who you are, and your response. And he gives 4 kinds of responses, which really limits it in itself. And aren't we going to have fun with this? In fact, I named them. The first soil is hard-hearted Hannah. She's tougher than nails, man. She's the wayside. She's been walked on, stepped on, and her response is nil. And he's very clean about what that soil is. And you realize the soil is soil. Whether it's packed or whether it's loose, it's soil. But it's the response of the soil that becomes the issue. So you can't say, well, I'm just that kind of soil. No, you are responsible for the kind of soil you are. So hard-hearted Hannah has allowed herself and chosen to be tougher than nails, man. And she doesn't respond. Now, the second soil he deals with is shallow, hollow holly. Yeah, she's about that thin, man. Just about that thin. I mean, hey, seed comes. Yeah, it springs up. Oh, she's on board. Whoa, 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 whoa. But in about 3 weeks, where is she? Well, somebody didn't pass her a bulletin. And she's really thin, man. A crust. Again, soil is soil. But we're talking about responsive soil. Now, the third one he's very clear about as well. And the third one is the thorn thing. And this is fickle, freckled Frederick. Because he gets all involved in the world. I believe in Jesus. Well, but you, I believe in ministry, but my schedule, and the cares of the world just come in on him and suffocate him. And he's so fickle in all of this. He's not fickle to the things that are comfort for him, but fickle when it comes to the things of the Spirit and what really matter, because he allows all the things of this clamorous world to squeeze out the things that really matter. And then, of course, there is the good soil. And the good soil is available, excepting Andrew. Oh, he's a jewel. He's a jewel. And obviously what Jesus is after is for all of us to be a good soil. So this really shouldn't be called the parable of the sower. This really should be called the parable of the soils. because that's the point of the parable. But we're here to talk about the sower. Who is the sower? You could say, well, Jesus is the sower. He doesn't say he is, but you would assume that. But then, wow, John the Baptist preached the word of the kingdom as well. In fact, in Matthew chapter 4, verse 13, Jesus is preaching the same identical message that John the Baptist preached in chapter 3, verse 3. So they are the same message. So John the Baptist preached the kingdom. Jesus preached the kingdom. So both of them could have been the sowers. In fact, the apostles, could they not have been sowers as well? In fact, isn't every member of the kingdom a sower? In fact, isn't the life of the kingdom a life of consistently, constantly sowing? So when you come down to say, who is the sower? It's like he says, that's not the point of the parable at all. It's not what I want to talk about. Now, the reason you know that is because of the setting. And this whole parable thing, I never got this before, so this is, wow, beautiful. Because this parable all makes sense, not that it didn't before, because it's so simple, but it all makes sense and has powerful impact in light of the setting in which it is told. And we've walked through this so much, but chapter 12 is the setting. Now, what are the issues in chapter 12, in the setting? Well, the issue starts out in the beginning of chapter 12 with the guys, with the apostles, picking grain on the Sabbath day. And the Pharisees, you note in verse 2, come and say, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day, which is picking grain. So the issue is picking grain on the Sabbath day. No, it's not. No, it's not. They say it is, but it's not. What happened was, they thought that was the issue. Jesus told them phenomenal, overwhelming truth. How did they respond to it? That's the issue. In fact, you move from that scene, and remember, this all happened on the same day, that you move from that scene to verse 9. And when he had departed from there, he went into the synagogue, and behold, there was a man with a withered hand. This is chapter 12, verse 9. A man with a withered hand. And they said, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Oh, now the issue is healing on the Sabbath day. Doing a medical procedure on the Sabbath day? You can't do that. That's the issue. No, it's not. That's not the issue at all. Well, what is the issue? Jesus told them out of that phenomenal truth. How did they respond to it? That's the issue. That's the issue. Well, when they got done with that, the Pharisees, of course, went and plotted murder in the conference room on the Sabbath day. And Jesus took the whole crowd on the Sabbath day, went out and just healed them all. Which is, I think, beautiful. You guys have your committee meeting? I'll go heal the multitude. Beautiful. So he's out doing all these miracles. Now the crowd goes crazy. And you can imagine that. Verse 23. The crowd, the multitudes, were all amazed. They were all amazed and said, could this be the Son of David? You can see this in a wave. It starts down at this end of the crowd, just begins to sweep through the crowd. And one by one, they just, whoa, could this be? Could this be? Could this be the Son? Is this the Messiah? Is this the one? Is he the, oh, this is the dream of the prophets? Is this the fulfillment of all that God has told us in an Old Testament? Is this the fulfillment of every sacrifice lamb we've ever offered? This is it, guys! Woo! And you can see the crowd just going crazy, can't you? And you would see why they would go crazy. I mean, all these miracles, demons are being cast out, people are, oh, it's phenomenal. But there's another opinion raised. And what's this opinion? This opinion is, verse 24, that's verse 23, This is verse 24, chapter 12, verse 24. When the Pharisees heard it, they said, "This fellow does not cast out demons except by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons." So you got two opinions. Oh, he's the Messiah. No, he's the devil. There's no middle ground in that, is there? Some of us have those kind of personalities, you know. You either like us or you hate our guts. There's no, oh, he's okay kind of stuff. See, you're either in or you're out, man. You either buy in or you respond. See, the issue is not, oh, do you believe he's the Messiah? Have you studied the Old Testament? Did he fulfill all? That's not, no, that's not. The issue is, how are you going to respond? What kind of soil are you? In fact, when it all finally filtered down, they said, down in verse, this is 38, they said, prove it. Prove it. We're back again. Yeah, do a sign. Jesus said, hey, signs are no problem. I can do a sign for you. But you won't accept it. Why? Because the issue is not signs. Are you getting this? See, the issue is not pick grain on the Sabbath. No, that's not the issue. I gave you truth. How are you going to respond to it? Medical technique on Sabbath? No, that's not the issue. The issue is, how are you going to respond to the truth I'm telling you? Are you the Messiah? Are you of the devil? That's really not. Do you fulfill? That's not. Hey, guys, I'm giving you phenomenal, overwhelming truth. How are you going to respond to it? Well, give us a sign. I can, but the issue is not the sign. How many magic tricks do you guys want? The issue is, are you going to respond to truth that I'm giving to you? The word of the kingdom, and what kind of soil are you? And finally, he comes and says, hey, let me tell you a story. 4 kinds of soil. And it's all about response. Because that's been the issue of the day. I can't tell you how strong this is. See, I wouldn't be a very good counselor. Or maybe I'd be really a great counselor. Because it wouldn't matter what issue you bring up. The issue is, how are you going to respond to truth that you already know? See, it isn't what I don't know that bothers me. It's the seed that's already been planted in my life that I already know. And how I respond to that, that's the issue. That's the point of the parable. So this is a parable of the soils. But we're talking about the sower. Now, some interesting insight given about the sower. Not in the explanation, but in the introduction of the parable itself. Look at verse 3, chapter 13. It says, behold, a sower went out to sow. Number 1, absolute what did I say? Absolute appearance. There is a sower. You can count on it. There is a sower. That's an absolute given. The whole thing is initiated out of that. Everything starts there. The presence of the sower is the beginning of the whole scene. I'm not going to explain to you. We're not going to argue about, well, who is he? How tall is he? We're not going to argue about the issues are not, well, where did God come from? That's not the issue. We're not here to discuss that. The issue is not a theological issue of creation. That's not, hey, another time, another place, we can discuss that, but that's not we're talking about the issue of the parable. The issue of the parable is there is a sower, and he is present, and he is initiating everything out of his presence. Whoa! And let me tell you what kind of a sower he is. He is a sower who at the heart of the universe is an aggressive, unconditional lover of your being. And at the beginning of the parable, there is a sower who is in love with the seed and the soil and wants growth in your life. And he is not against you. And oh man, we talk about this so often. But how can you talk about this too much? Because his heart is a heart of unconditional. You got to get this. Unconditional. Well, you talked about that Sunday. I think I did. I think you talked about it Wednesday night. I think I did. Unconditional. Well, let's talk about it again then. Unconditional love. Which means it's not conditional. See, if it's unconditional, come on, this fits the level of the parable because the parable is on nursery rhyme level. I mean, it's so simple. That at the heart of the universe, ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of your universe, I'm telling you, there is an aggressive lover of your soul who is a sower by nature. And when we say he is unconditional in his love, not conditional, that's because of who he is. See, that automatically smacks of his nature. See, the reason love is conditional is because it starts with you. And when love in my life between you and me starts with you, then it's conditional. Because it's dependent upon how you treat me. We went over this. Let me go over it again. Love in my life, in this world, all starts out of a need. I have a need. Therefore, I love. If I don't have a need, I don't love. I fell in love with this beautiful young woman. Why? I had a need. Don't look at me that way. You're the same way. I had a need. I got to have somebody wash my clothes. Got to have somebody take care of the kids. So I love that woman. Well, what happens if she doesn't meet my needs? I don't love her anymore. I find somebody else who meets my needs, and I love them. That is called conditional love. It's based upon love that's need-based. And because I have a need, and when you meet that need, I love, which is conditioned on you meeting my needs and desires. You're my best friend. Yeah, why? Because you fulfill my desires. You fix my plumbing. You change my flat tire. And when you don't act like I want you to act, you are not my friend anymore. Why? Because it's conditional love. I'm telling you tonight, God is not that way. And the reason He's not that way is because this doesn't have anything to do with you. This has everything, you got to get this. This has everything to do with Him and who He is. He's a sower. And His nature is the nature of aggressive, passionate love. Nothing you've ever done has been good enough to cause God to love you, so nothing you ever do will be bad enough to cause God not to love you. So don't ever call me on the phone and say, I don't think God loves me because I did something really bad. That has nothing to do with this. Because His love is not based upon you. And do you remember we said, when you put right here the worst sinner in the world, and you put the greatest saint in the world right here, God loves them both the same. Why? Because it's not about them, it's about Him. Whoa. Do you realize how significant that is? You can't make God mad. You can't turn Him off. You can't do anything to make Him quit. Because boiling in His blood, burning in His bones, is this aggressive heart of love that says, I'm a sower, and I just can't help myself. And you can go and sit in a corner, man, and we'll provide you a chair. And you can have a pity party. Nobody loves me. But the truth of the matter is, at the heart of the universe, there is an aggressive lover of your soul who just isn't going to quit. Because He's after you. He is absolutely after you. And regardless of your response, seed is going to fall on your soil. You hard-hearted Hannah, you. You shallow, hollow Holly, He's going to get you. You fickle, freckled Frederick, He's coming after you. Because it's not about you. It's about Him and who He is. That's phenomenal. Oh, man. Let me give you the second one. Absolute appearance. The sower. Absolute action. He, the sower, went out. Couldn't help himself. Had to sow. Absolutely has to do it. Can't stop. And the amazing thing about this is, in His going out, this is a parable, in His going out, all of this, from our view, has happened in the past. In other words, this is all done. See, it isn't God is going to sow, it's, He may, because He can do anything He wants to. But the truth of the matter is, He's already sown in your life. Remember Joan of Arc, she came to the king, great saint, came to the king, said, God gave me a message for you, king. And the king turned to her and said, if God wants to talk to me, why doesn't He speak to me Himself? She said, He does, but you're not listening. So don't sit here tonight and say, does God speak to me? Doesn't He speak to me? Will He speak to me? When's He going to speak to me? He is! He is! Your ears are ringing with His truth. And if you say, how's He going to speak to me? I don't know. But I can give you examples of such variety that it is just absolutely phenomenal, the invention that God makes in the speaking of His voice. I mean, there's a Balaam the prophet who is confronted with a jackass, which may be the way God is speaking to you tonight. I mean, Peter, can you imagine? Denies 3 times. And here's a rooster, right out of the beak of a rooster. God speaks, and the man is crushed in his inner heart at the voice of God. I mean, Elijah, sitting underneath a juniper tree, and God is sweeping through with varieties of things, and then comes and speaks in a small Moses, burning bush. How's God going to speak to you? I don't know. But that's not the question. The question is, how has He spoken? And you have had the truth planted in your life. Well, preacher, I haven't been around the church. I wasn't raised in a godly family. I don't know. I don't know a lot about the Bible. Totally immaterial. Whether it's this amount of truth or that amount of truth, Would you follow? How are you responding to what you know? It's really interesting. People will come wringing their hands saying, oh, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And if you just let them talk, they already know. So you already know. God has already spoken. The issue is not, is he going to go out? He's gone out. The issue is not, is there a sower? There is a sower. He's present. The issue is the response. And let me just mention the third, the absolute effect. See, there's the absolute appearance. There is the sower. There's the absolute action. He did go out. And there's the absolute effect. He went out to sow. Wouldn't it be interesting if in your life the only activity that God is into is telling you the truth? Don't you just want to go to God once in a while and say, God, just lie to me a little bit. Don't always pick out the wart on my nose. Just tell me how nice I am. But he is a sower of truth. How are you going to respond? Can't get away from him. He is who he is, and he does what he does. Well, I won't go to church. Makes it worse. He's after you. Jesus, I want to embrace the truth you have brought to my life. I know people have walked on me. But that's no excuse for my hardness, because you've never walked on me. I don't cry out tonight for new truth. I'm not asking you tonight to give me new insight. I do that sometimes, but why would you give me new truth until I've lived up to and embraced and allowed the truth I know? And hey, God, this is not about anybody here, I guess, but me, maybe, I don't know. But could it be we're all in the same spot? And that is, you have spoken truth to us. And we all know. And you've put your finger on stuff in our lives. And will we respond? And the answer is yes. We will respond. Because you're the lover of our soul. Desiring growth in our lives. So call us again. Call us. Oh, rooster! Crow again! Jackass. Speak another time. Bush burn. Still small voice. Whisper in our heart. Moments of response. Altars open. Man, He loves you. He loves you. No resistance. Don't let pride, the stupidity of pride, stand in your way. Hide no longer. Available, accepting Andrew, I shall be.